So, who is this God? This one who wants our rejoicing, who receives our worship and demands so much strict loyalty. How do we know when it's God speaking to us, who's commanding us, showing us a way to go? We often speak of God's way as if it were some easily definable thing, a road clearly seen, a journey already plotted. And yet, our experience and the experience of the people in the Bible remind us that often God's way is known best in retrospect, looking backward. In the present, filled with innumerable tasks and multiple choices, it's even less clearly seen. How do we know when we are responding to God's invitation to be alive in God's way, or to the secular world's invitation to feel good, or to worship the golden calf? After the initial euphoria of freedom wore off, people of Israel were faced with the difficult and dangerous journey through an unknown wilderness to a not yet seen land. They had to develop new skills, learn to forage for their food in unaccustomed ways, and to eat unaccustomed foods, and in the stresses of learning to live in a different world, to begin to see themselves as a people, as a covenant community. All of this, of course, was done under their leader Moses, who at least had lived in the wilderness for quite some time and who had much less of the fears of their fears regarding this life. In today's passage, we see how the community responds to the prolonged absence of their able leader. While Moses is up on Mount Sinai hearing the detailed rules for the building of a tabernacle and the commandments for the people's ritual life, they are down below, worried, wondering what's happened to him, wondering if God is with them. And they're down below, melting those fears and their golden rings and earrings, spoils of Egypt, actual symbols of their deliverance, melting into a golden idol, another throwback to their golden days in Egypt. There's some theological debate about whether these people are actually trying to worship another God or whether they're just trying to put a face or an image to God in Moses' absence, as he represented God to them. But all in all, it is about what does God look like? Who is this God who we are supposed to worship? Most modern people tend to sort of snigger at these quaint pieces of ancient history. We might even think, how ridiculous to worship an object that you yourself has just made or bought. How crazy to worship some inanimate thing. Those crazy fickle Israelites. They couldn't even wait for the rules to get written down before they were foolishly breaking the very first one. And yet, when we think about it, a God is that thing or person in which we place our ultimate trust, our allegiance, and loyalty. As soon as we give a definition to worshiping false gods, we are likely to find that we have false gods all around us too. Perhaps they're not statues or graven images, but nonetheless, we have often given our allegiance to things. The golden calf. Or maybe it's a gold Visa or MasterCard, the golden passbook. Beware, lest we place our security, our futures in the investment broker, the IRAs, the social security system. There's a thin line between prudent caretaking of our resources and idolatrous trust in worldly security. We're finding right now in the present market that this is very misplaced. misplaced trust. Look inside your purses and pocketbooks and discover these symbols of possible false gods. Look at your keychain, discover more possible idols. What's valuable enough to you that you feel you must keep it under lock and key? House key doesn't just represent shelter, a necessity. It represents possessions, family, security, safety. Your car isn't just transportation, it's a symbol of status. What else do you lock up? All of these are potential idols. If we place our trust, our allegiance, our loyalty there more than with God. The golden watch that you wear or the device that you carry is telling of your loyalties as well. Whatever you keep track of your time and calendar on, what you spend your time on tells all about where your priorities lie. You spend 5 minutes loving the people God gave to you and 10 hours building a career. Do you spend hours in front of the television or perhaps on that cell phone where your calendar is kept and not a moment at an altar? Some people spend more time washing and waxing and polishing their vehicles than they do in prayer and meditation. Is that shining chrome equivalent to a golden calf? There are many other possible idols for us in our world today. Even our allegiance to country, to a flag, to a way of governance can become idolatrous. There have been lately many protracted discussions about world events, summits, and so on. Middle East, Afghanistan, Russia, and our support of governments here and there around the world, of Congress giving or not giving the president leverage to do what he wants when he wants, pulling out of talks, etc. Also about the economy and what roles government plays in keeping the economy on the right track. These are good discussions to have, especially when the question posed most often among church folk is, what is a Christian response? What does a Christian choose when it comes to war, for example, to humanitarian aid and asylum for refugees and children pouring over our borders? Very often the discussions I hear on the news contain a we in those discussions. We need to do this. We want that. Will we have to pay for it? Could that big word W-E be or become a golden W-E? That is a golden idol. Most of our allegiance is to the we, the people of the United States, our own wants, wishes, and desires to the detriment of other peoples around the globe. First, our allegiance is to the golden we, America first. There's nothing wrong, of course, with seeing to the real needs of your own population first. That's who we're responsible for, if we really will. But often it's an excuse not to help others when we have no real intent to really help our own either. When we worship the golden we, the USA, or the idea of democracy, the people of God have gotten distracted by the warm, fuzzy feelings of patriotism and forgotten the mandate of God to love our neighbor, to tend to the needs of the least of these, and to worship only God. Has the idea and ideal of patriotism, or even of partisanism, become a golden calf for Christians in the USA today? Yes, worshiping an individual or idea rather than following the mandates to love God first, our neighbor next. And in doing those things, we would be acting in our own best interest as well. Our true best interest, anyway. The self-centered golden we also treats other species and the planet itself as if humans usually humans who are the wealthiest, as if we are more important than what God has also created. So the importance that we place on obtaining things and making more wealth, the pumping up of our economy for our own comfort and convenience, has higher priority than our protection of the air, of the water and soil, and the survival of the creatures and even of the planet itself. Where our loyalties lie is something to think about as we try to discern what Jesus would do in such a world as we have right now. What is God's will? Who is this God? To what or whom do we give our full trust, allegiance, and loyalty finally? These commandments, those many rules set down so very long ago, were about living in community on this earth. They were rules meant to make a better world for everyone, which is also a way of serving God. Those who were responsible for writing down the laws for the people of that time could never have anticipated every nuance of the coming centuries and the cultures that would develop, and especially not the technologies. But we can still live within the spirit of the law at its most basic, and what it tells us to respect and care for one another, and to be fair and not take life, which is all basically living in God's way. In the present world full of many, many distractions, many evils, much confusion, it's hard to discern exactly what is God's way. Let us not, however, in our confusion, fashion a golden something or person that you expect to save us, rather than align with the spirit of the one true God, the one who is forgiving, gracious, full of loving kindness, slow to anger, and jealous of our affections. Let us first and foremost give our trust, our allegiance, and our loyalty to God, who eventually will show us the way. Thank God that Moses convinced his Lord to relent about destroying the community at the base of that mountain. Be grateful that God remembered whose they were so that they could eventually remember whose they were. History changed because God chose them and chose to keep them. We too have a chance to change history if we can remember whose we are. The golden calves have no power over us. We belong to God.